All right, ready to dive into some fascinating business theory with us today?
Absolutely. Should be fun.
It might sound a little dense, but trust me, it's surprisingly relevant to, well, pretty much everyone. We're tackling resource-based view and stakeholder theory.
Two really influential ideas in business.
Yeah, and we're going to uncover some surprisingly human insights along the way.
Looking forward to it.
So picture this. You walk into your favorite bakery, right? What makes it so special?
The smell of fresh bread.
Well, yeah, that too. But think deeper. Is it their sourdough starter? A secret recipe passed down for generations.
Their unique ingredient makes sense.
Exactly. That's the core of the resource-based view, or RBV. It suggests that a company's unique assets, its secret sauce, give it a competitive edge.
Makes sense. So like a tech company with a powerful algorithm or a fashion brand with a unique design aesthetic.
Exactly. Those unique resources are what set them apart. But now, here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
Around the same time that RBV was gaining traction, another idea emerged, something called stakeholder theory.
Yes. Stakeholder theory. It popped up around the mid-1980s.
Right alongside RBV.
And from the same field, strategic management.
But it took a very different approach, didn't it?
Stakeholder theory says that a company's success isn't just about what's happening inside, but how well it manages relationships outside its walls.
So it's not just about pleasing the shareholders.
It's about considering all stakeholders, employees, customers, suppliers, even the wider community.
Wow, that's a much broader perspective.
Right. It argues that businesses need to create a sustainable system where everyone involved benefits in the long run.
Now, that might sound a bit idealistic, even a bit soft in the often cutthroat world of business.
Right. But that's where things get really interesting. Because even though both theories were born from the same field, they took wildly different paths.
How so?
Well, RBV, with its focus on competition and leveraging internal resources, it quickly gained a lot of traction in the business world.
It's easier to measure profits and tangible assets.
Exactly.
Right.
But stakeholder theory, it was often relegated to discussions about ethics, kind of an afterthought.
Interesting. So you're saying that while both theories recognize the importance of relationships, stakeholder theory put them front and center.
Right. And by doing that, it challenged a core assumption of traditional business thinking, that doing the right thing and making a profit are somehow at odds with each other.
So it's not just about being nice, but about understanding that ethical behavior can actually be a smart business strategy.
Exactly. Stakeholder theory argues that ignoring the ethical implications of your actions, overlooking the impact on all your stakeholders, can have serious consequences.
Consequences that can ultimately hurt your bottom line.
Absolutely. In fact, let's take a look at General Motors under the leadership of Jose Ignacio Lopez back in the 1990s. He was brought in to shake things up, cut costs, and improve profitability. And initially, he seemed to deliver.
Sounds like classic RBV thinking so far, right?
Yeah.
Leverage your power, get the best possible deal, maximize profits.
Exactly. He took a very aggressive approach, particularly with suppliers, demanding steep discounts, squeezing them for every penny. And you know what? In the short term, it seemed like a winning strategy.
GM's profits soared, I'm assuming.
They did. But what they didn't fully anticipate were the long-term consequences of damaging those crucial relationships.
Their relationships with their suppliers. How so?
Well, put yourself in the shoes of a supplier for a moment. You're constantly being squeezed, pressured to cut costs, to the bone, really.
You'd start to feel resentful, I imagine.
Exactly. And you might even be tempted to cut corners, right? Maybe use cheaper materials or just feel less invested in the relationship.
Makes sense. So what happened at GM?
Well, that's exactly what happened. The quality of their vehicles started to suffer. Innovation stalled. And their reputation took a hit.
Wow. So even though they were focused on maximizing profits in the short term,
It backfired in the long run.
because they had damaged those critical relationships with their suppliers.
Precisely. And that's where stakeholder theory offers such a powerful counterpoint to that purely transactional mindset that can sometimes dominate RBV thinking.
It's about playing the long game.
Exactly. Recognizing that every stakeholder, from your employees and suppliers, all the way to the community you operate in, plays a vital role in your long-term success.
It's interesting you mentioned that because it reminds me of the story of Whole Foods and the Austin flood back in 1981. I think they were still a relatively young company then.
Right, with just the one store.
Yeah, and it was completely submerged. You'd think that would be the end for a young company, but...
They had something that money couldn't buy.
Oh.
A network of strong, loyal stakeholders. It's a remarkable story, really.
So what happened? Did their customers and suppliers, maybe even competitors, all rally around them?
They did. Suppliers offered them credit without hesitation. Customers volunteered to help clean up the wreckage. Investors doubled down on their support.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's a real testament to the power of relationships.
It's almost as if those strong stakeholder relationships became a form of crisis insurance, something that traditional RBV, with its focus on controlling tangible assets, might overlook.
Exactly. It shows how a company's relationships can be just as valuable, if not more so, than its physical resources.
So it's not just about what you have, but who you know and how you treat them.
Precisely. And that brings us to another key difference between RBV and stakeholder theory, how they view people.
Okay, how so?
Well, RBV, with its roots in economic theory, it often views people as human resources.
Another factor of production to be optimized for maximum output.
Right, kind of like machinery or raw materials. And while that's not inherently wrong, stakeholder theory challenges us to see beyond just the resource and recognize the human being.
To remember that there's a person with their own motivations and aspirations behind that job title.
Exactly. They have families, lives outside of work. They're not just cogs in a machine.
It's easy to forget that in the daily grind of business, isn't it?
It is. And this is where things get really interesting, because when you start viewing your employees as valued stakeholders, not just resources to be exploited, it can fundamentally change how you approach your business.
So treating your employees well isn't just the right thing to do ethically.
It can actually be a smart strategic decision.
Because happy employees lead to happy customers and ultimately a healthier bottom line.
Precisely.
Are there any companies that you think exemplify this stakeholder-centric approach really well?
Absolutely. Take Southwest Airlines, for instance. They're known for their exceptional treatment of their employees. Even during the pandemic, when other airlines were, laying off workers left and right, Southwest offered voluntary buyouts instead.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. So they put their money where their mouth was, so to speak?
Exactly. And you know what? That commitment to their employees, it's translated into a stronger brand, better customer service, and ultimately a more profitable business.
They invested in their people, and it paid off.
Precisely.
It really drives home the point that business doesn't have to be this, cutthroat, zero-sum game.
Absolutely. It's not about choosing sides between ruthless efficiency and ethical behavior.
Right.
It's about recognizing that in today's world, especially, with how interconnected everything is, cooperation can be just as powerful as competition. Maybe even more so.
It's about finding those win-win situations.
Exactly. And understanding that building a sustainable business, it isn't about squeezing every last drop of profit from your resources.
Right.
It's about creating a system where everyone benefits, everyone feels valued.
And that's how you build trust.
Exactly.
Loyalty.
Yes.
And ultimately long-term success.
I think that's a great place to wrap up. What do you think?
Absolutely. This has been a fascinating deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground from, the theoretical underpinnings of RBV and stakeholder theory to real-world examples of how these ideas actually play out in the business world.
And how they can be applied, not just to, big corporations, but to all of us.
Exactly. So to our listeners, as you go about your week, think about this. How can you apply these principles, the principles of RBV and stakeholder theory, in your own life? How can you, leverage your own unique strengths, your own secret sauce, so to speak, while also nurturing those relationships.
And creating those win-win situations.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together, that our actions have ripple effects.
And that, even small changes can make a big difference in the long run.
Absolutely. This has been another fascinating deep dive. Until next time, keep those minds curious. And remember,
What was that again?
the most valuable resources are often the ones we can't put a price tag on.